Thanks, Eddie, again for being here and for taking your time to share what's been working. I'm sure that it'll help a lot of sales reps do more of the activities that actually matter instead of, just getting generic advice on, hey, pick up the phone and start dialing, which still matters, but, order matters too. Let me share my screen, briefly recap where we left off last week, and that'll be a good segue into the exact outbound approach. In the meantime, I'm seeing that Budapest is in the house. Yeah. So, Yanni, can you confirm that my screen is visible?
Yes, 100%.
Perfect. So what we're seeing is how account list building used to look like, what used to work, and the new way of working. To recap, the first three steps is the exactly the same of how it used to be. You build a accounts list based on your ICP. You don't stop there, but augment that list with lookalike search. What other companies are there that fit my ICP that look just like my best customers? Then, because you don't want to step on your team members' toes, you're going to filter for what's in your exact territory. Then prioritize that list based on velocity factors. So which companies have a higher propensity to pay the shortest amount of time, the most amount of sales. But what's changing is instead of then segmenting that list, which we used to rely on, and then take hey, should I be reaching out based on a warm outreach approach, targeting first and second degree connections, asking for warm intros, or just enrolling them in a highly segmented outreach campaign. We're going to use signal monitoring to identify which of these accounts who are in my ICP and have a high propensity to buy are actually in market right now, because only about 5% of your target list is going to be in market at any given time. And because AI made it super simple to scale outreach, buyers are started just to ignore even the best types of emails because they no longer believe or trust that there's a human behind unsolicited outreach. So once we know who is likely in market based on actual signals, we can segment our approach. Hey, at these companies, do we have first or secondary connections? Or should I just personalize my outreach based on insights that I have from these signals, or just, default to pain and challenge based outreach campaigns and cost of inaction based outreach campaigns? We've also discussed what signals actually matter. Just forget fundraising signals, post engagements, people who follow competitors, and general hiring signals that are available on LinkedIn. And definitely don't take news articles as a reason to reach out, because by the time something makes the news, the initiative is already underway or done. So you're late to the party. Instead, there are signals to use, like job changes, especially if they're executive level hires. Sales Navigator has actually a good first party intent data called category intent, showing who's actively taking activity on the platform that signals that they're interested in a product category or solution category. If you can find who are competitor users and use a displacement strategy, that could be a great approach if you have a compelling reason to take a meeting with you. If someone's looking for a persona, unlike what LinkedIn is able to show you on Sales Navigator. And then, of course, again, first party data, 10K and 10Q reports that mention an initiative that you want to facilitate. So this is roughly where we left off, and we gave examples of how we built our own outreach approach based on this. Yanni, now that we know what signals are out there and what signals count as just surface level and what are really intense signals, are there any situations where you think signals don't matter or you can't rely on signals for effective outreach?
I think signals, so I'm going to be on this like very extreme end of the spectrum in a sense that I think monitoring signals is 100% always a good idea. Fine print, if you are tracking the right signals. You just explained, surface level signals and actual real intent signals. So I think it's always a good idea to monitor them, but there are very bad ways also to do it. So for example, when I would say when people are engaging with your competitors' social media posts, you want to know about that. Like you want to see the conversation, you want to understand that. But then I'm sure like you've received outreach like this. Hey, I've noticed your comment on XYZ post. I think that's bad
Yeah, like one
outreach.
a week at least.
You don't. Yeah, it's like it doesn't really have anything to do with your current situation. They haven't really done any research on it. They don't really did the research on what the exact post was about. It's just a bad excuse to why am I reaching out to you now? And like, okay, obviously they want to sell something to you, but I cannot really reach out and say, hey, buy my stuff. So that's bad outreach. This is like a tiny bit fraction better, but still just very bad. And it doesn't create any true relevancy. It is personal, but it is not relevant. So I think you should track those signals, but just like put a little bit more effort and thought into that outreach.
I love how you called out relevance because yes, intent signals can show you, and I'm using can because it's not definitive, but can show you who is in market right now. So where timing is good, but then you still need to make it relevant. And how you make that relevant is by filtering out the signals that don't inherent or aren't inherently about buyer behavior. So it doesn't tie back to the persona's job to be done. Just because someone fundraised doesn't mean that that fundraising is part of their job to be done. They're using those funds for new initiatives, but that initiative is separate from the fact whether they raised funds or to scale faster or not. Same goes for competitor follows. I might want to keep up with the latest and greatest, but it doesn't mean that I have a problem to be solved right now. I'm just, keeping in the know. So if something does happen, then I know who to call to provide a solution or to potentially use to fix the problem. So I love how you called out relevance because it is relevant if it ties back to the job to be done. You could personalize these, but again, these are surface level, so don't indicate a behavior that has to be completed. So it comes down to relevance comes down to how well you know your ICP and then use the right intent data with the knowledge that you have about the persona to reach out. So jumping into how we're going to reach out to this list, this is how we started approaching it. We have our total prospect list on the y-axis, and we separate it into market segments because just how signals are not created equal, there are segments where you're either not going to have any signals available to you, or they're not going to provide enough volume for you to be able to use a signal-based approach, and then your outreach has to change. So let's start with SMB for a moment, because what we can see immediately is that, yes, there's more cold outreach to be done in SMB, whereas we're trying to do more signals on warm outreach in enterprise, and mid-market is obviously somewhere in between. But Yanni, what was the reason that SMB for SMB is just not a viable option to use signals?
Well, the biggest thing about it, I think, is the smaller the company, the less of a digital footprint they're going to have, the less employees they have, the less posts they make, the less they make it on the news, stuff like that. So they're just inherently, by the size of their digital footprint, there's not going to be many signals to detect. Also, they're much more prone to like disruption and change. They might go in one direction today, but then like next week, because I don't know, shit hit the fan and they gotta do something else in their strategy, they are very quick to change their direction just by their size. So there are gonna be some signals. For example, I think one that is universally useful is when they are hiring to solve a problem. Job listings and job ads are publicly available. They are rather easy to scrape. And it just might be a very good time to reach out with a relevant problem that you can solve for that persona. Other than that, like these SMBs, I don't think you'll find like a whole lot of signals. Maybe you'll find one or two social media posts, but then it's not really going to be scalable. Yeah, maybe a couple
Yeah.
percent of your total addressable market will have that signal. And that's why I think it just makes more sense to do absolute cold outreach to them.
I love how you added which signals you can actually use because, yes, the reason that we included signals here is because signals do exist. It's just going to be in a lower volume than with enterprise. And hiring is definitely something that is public. Yes, some of these SMB companies will outsource to a boutique agency, and then you might not be able to connect the dots that, yes, this job posting is tied to this company, but often they're going to also share the job posts on their LinkedIn profiles, and then you can use that as a signal. As long as you're drilling in manually on LinkedIn Sales Navigator or LinkedIn specifically, because LinkedIn Sales Navigator doesn't show you this information. You want to find this out manually then. I mean, I know you have a automated way of doing it, but it might not make sense for SMB. But then SMBs won't have 10K or 10Q reports usually, because this is reserved for public companies. But if they're using website, so if you are working with the front end tool, you might also know who is using a competitor built in the tech stack that they are using in a customer facing way. But other than that, there's going to be less information here. But I wanted to call out something that goes hand in hand with what you said. Yes, there will be fewer signals. Plus, what actually matters, we're not using signals for signal's sake. We're using signals to improve our sales velocity. And sales velocity is essentially multiplying the deal size by the number of deals that you can close in a given time plus your win rate, or multiplied by also your win rate, and then dividing this with the time it takes to close a deal. That's your sales velocity. Signals tell you where to focus now, who's in market, which is what? It's your win rate. So signals help influence your win rate, which is why we're using it. But if sales velocity is faster, if you can reach out directly, like with SMB, where you're going to know who the decision maker is, because it's easy to see or to transparently overview a company. Usually, if they're more like white collar workers, you're going to know who might be the right person to tell me, hey, is this relevant or not? And that person will be able to either tell you, yes, let's hop on a call, or they're going to shoot down the project anyway. So you're going to take a top-down approach, which is a really advantageous position to be in SMB. It's still going to be the fastest way to book a meeting. Hey, share your build a point of view based on what you know the account. Cold call them if you can find the right number for them. You can take a top-down approach instead of using signals. But if you do have signals to use to personalize your point of view, then that's great. Was there something you wanted to add to that?
No, I was just I yeah. Actually, I was thinking of something connecting, but like you actually like already answered. So no.
Okay, sorry to steal your thunder if I did so, but that's SMB, and we're not, and because of that, because we're talking about signals and how they can help improve sales velocity, we're not going to talk about SMB anymore. We're going to focus the rest of the session on what signals are usually found in mid-market and enterprise, and then based on what technology you're selling, is it hardware, software, somewhere in between, you might have access to some additional signals to use.
Actually, what I
But those
heard
are,
from all of this
yes.
is and I think we can agree on that part. You have to, when you can, you have to, and you should monitor those signals. But a signal is not a reason to reach out. It just helps you influence your pipeline velocity.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Exactly. It helps influence your message. So yes, your velocity, as in where gives you insights where if you focus somewhere, you have a larger likelihood of booking that first meeting if you're using a direct sales approach. But again, that just tells you where to focus. If depending on the signal, it can also tell you how to personalize that point of view, which influences the message. If with target the right person with the right message at the right time is how you get to a meeting. None of these are definitive because these signals aren't facts. They're just pieces of information that you can use to put together a picture. Yes. And then what do you do with those signals? Let's just go over what signals are available, and then we can jump into the core of today's session, which is the right approach to reach out manually or with automation. The main difference that we discussed leading up to this webinar is, yes, enterprise has more signals just because their digital footprint is higher than mid-market. How we also differentiate between mid-market and enterprise is mid-market is not always, but a lot of times, still one company with potentially multiple child companies located in different geographic locations, but they're still one entity or one brand, let's say. Whereas with enterprise, you might have an umbrella company or a holding company where through a company has expanded through acquisitions, and they'll have multiple brands under a larger conglomerate. And that means that not only are there more signals just because the digital footprint is higher, you also have more possibilities for warm outreach, because whereas in mid-market, you can resort to first degree and second degree connections to get warm intros or to go in with a point of view through someone who already trusts you. If you are able to enter an enterprise company, a child company of that enterprise company, a smaller one with an SMB approach, let's say, because that's one of these companies could be just 200 employees, but they're part of a holding company. You could then have someone champion you making an intro to another company within that same holding company. So expansion as an approach to warm outreaches in the enterprise is also possible. Either way, we discussed that it's better to start, more often than not, better to start bottom up, because by the time you talk to an executive, they're going to expect you to bring something to the table that they haven't figured out already. Something that's happening on the front lines that's affecting one of their initiatives, and you bring in insights into how they can do that better. So yes, you could go top down if you have contacts, but more often than not, if you're doing direct sales and you don't have much contacts, it's going to be a bottom up approach. Before we jump into how we're going to use then these signals for either warm outreach or cold outreach, was there anything that you wanted to add to this explanation of what we drafted up here, Yanni?
No, I think you've like summed it up right. This is, I think, like a pet peeve of a lot of companies. How do we limit the number of contacts that we prospect per account, for example, or like a very popular approach that we see across the board with our clients is like a mixed approach. So this is there's no one size fits all kind of strategy when it comes to your outbound. If I really had to give one that should work for a lot of teams, is that tier one or strategic accounts or key accounts or whatever you call them, the most important prospects, your dream clients, you should probably keep that manual and keep it high touch because it's going to be worth it. It's going to be a higher ticket size. It's going to be worth your effort to put in the manual research and the manual effort into tailoring that message. And then tier two and below, you should definitely consider automation because there's going to be too much noise to cut through, too much effort, too many manual processes to have your team do. So what we typically like recommend is automation and AI, it's not really to replace your team, it's to enhance their capabilities and output or throughput. So that's how you should think about it. If you can automate the account research, do it. And then you can just enable your team to use that insight. For example, analyzing 10K reports, it's like reading through that manually a couple years ago. It was like one of the most tedious parts
No
of an
way.
SDR's job.
Yeah.
And now you can do that in a minute with AI. Let's talk about then, and this is, I think, where it can get a little bit more spicy. What should be kept human led and what should be kept automation led? What's your take?
Right. Yes. One of the things that I was explaining when my
Yeah,
internet froze is a specific thing that I loved about the human element. If you have a lookalike company, if one of your strategic accounts is a lookalike company, you already know who bought at your customer and what pains they've solved. So if you can just match who is the persona that was your challenge or your champion, your gatekeeper, your executive buyer, your decision maker, you can target these people with very specific messages and a strong point of view. That's not something that you want to automate, even if you could create a standard template for it. But specifically, if I already know that yes, this account is fit for my ICP and I have a signal that I can look for, these are the things that I specifically use to keep my outbound human. Again, I'm mostly working with mid-market and enterprise companies, or that's the sales cycle that I'm working with. So my top three favorite that I follow is obviously because I'm targeting B2B companies, I'm going to be using LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So what I love is saved searches, and I'll share my screen to specifically how I'm using these. I'm using LinkedIn's Sales Navigator's category intent data because this is first-party intent data or first-party data on user behavior that's happening on LinkedIn. So that's something that as long as LinkedIn hands it over with little filters, I could trust that. And then a feature that not many teams who I've trained know about is LinkedIn Smart Links and how to use that to separate those who are interested versus not interested. But how I usually start with is, okay, I know that I'm targeting a company. Let's see what is my best. I already know my personas and who I'm going to reach out. Let's see what is my best way in. So what I do is I always create a list of, in Sales Navigator, you can create different saved searches, whether it's for accounts or or leads, and looks like LinkedIn needs to reload again. Okay, so here I have, these are all saved leads, and I like to tidy these up with emojis, but essentially who are second degree connections, who have changed jobs at my customer, who are direct persona fit hits at ICP. But again, this is just a persona based outreach so far. A signal is when someone new matches that persona. So it was likely part of a job change, again, which is job changes are top of the list for us when we're looking for intent signals. If someone now meets a persona description at an ICP company, that means that something has happened that caused them to land in a new position and now they're a hit. And I have 3 results here who I can outbound. Or if I'm close to someone or have a strong relationship with someone, I can specifically set if someone is able to introduce me at an account. So let's say here, if I click whether Rick knows someone at my accounts list, and I'm not sure why LinkedIn isn't loading fast. So these are my total accounts list, 1,400 accounts in these 2 lists together. If someone works at these companies who fills in these functions as is a direct connection of this person, who are all these people that I could potentially get an introduction to? What I can also do is filter this further for non-first degree connections to just see who are second degree connections. And then I can go, okay, there's no one here specifically, but if there was a second degree connection on this list, I could see, hey, Rick, are you open to introducing me? And so far, this could be a manual search. You could do it manually, but if you save a list like this as a saved search, you will be notified by LinkedIn any time that a person has a new connection at your ICP list who can introduce you. Again, that doesn't mean that that's high intent signal. It just gives you a way to reach out warm into the account, which is still a very easy way to build pipeline. At least you'll know a definitive yes or no, and people are more likely to accept a connection request or accept a meeting if that's coming through someone they trust. So that's one thing that I like to set up. Another thing is our accounts list. So let's say if I'm going into my accounts list here, I want to look at all saved accounts, almost 10,000 accounts in this list together. What LinkedIn has are 2 intent signals. One is buyer intent, meaning someone is following your company or you specifically. That's not real buyer intent for me. However, you can set up categories, different categories in Sales Navigator. And if a user on LinkedIn at your list of saved companies is searching for that type of solution category or product category, not only will LinkedIn share how many employees are searching for collectively that area, that problem category or product category, but let's say if I'm interested in who's interested in sales intelligence software, that must mean that they're looking for contact data. Again, contact data, which has become harder to find in recent years. That means that they care about outbound sales. Something's not working. It might be a good idea for me to reach out. And so what I can do here is click into who specifically at those accounts is interested in sales intelligence software. And it's going to take a minute to load here for some reason. But what LinkedIn Sales Navigator can do is what I haven't seen in other platforms, which is naming intent on a personal level, not company level, not persona level, personal level, who's looking at a category. So let's say if I'm targeting 10x banking, they're from an old list. So that's why I can talk about them. There are 38 employees who are researching sales intelligence software. That to me means that they are using direct sales, and getting access to sales data is probably one of their challenges. That's a good intent signal for me that something's wrong in outbound, and maybe we can help them get into new accounts. And LinkedIn Sales Navigator on a personal level will tell me who is exactly looking. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say, hey, name, I saw that you're looking at this, so I know you have a problem with direct sales. Want to talk? Because that's not going to work. Plus, it sounds creepy, right? But if you can create a point of view about
Yeah.
what's probably going on in their world, then I can reach out with a message that likely will get a response because sales intelligence and data is top of mind, and overcoming low connection rates is something that's likely top of mind. So I might get a meeting booked or a connection request accepted. Yanni, do you have, yeah, and another thing is just LinkedIn Smart Links. This is a short topic, so I'll just get it through. LinkedIn Smart Links. That's a whichever outbound approach you're going to use, whether it's first and second degree connections or cold outreach based on signals. You can add not your first email, but let's say a follow up email or LinkedIn DM. You can add a smart link where you up LinkedIn Smart Link is a document, a trackable document essentially, where you upload some resource, could be a lead magnet, could be an insight, something, and you can share a link with a person, and then LinkedIn tells you who's looking, when they are looking, how long they've looked at a resource, and which pages specifically. Again, these are first party insights on who cares about the resource you shared. If someone isn't, then you have to change your approach up. But if someone's interested, you know specifically what they were interested about, so you can tailor your message even more. This is my go. These three are my go-to ways for targeting new people at my ICP list. Again, these are very manual, and I don't recommend automating these. However, you can set up LinkedIn as a system to automatically give you signals that you can then use for outreach. But what's your take?
Yeah, well, so just to reflect, smart links, I've heard about it, but I've never really utilized it that much, and like it was very like eye-opening for me. And the other two, say searches, category intent. I mean, I love the idea, and like LinkedIn's first-party data is something that probably we should rely on a little bit more. It's just that as it needs to be, this is the part that you cannot really automate today because LinkedIn keeps it gated. You cannot really extract these intent signals from the platform, so you got to check it for a lot of contacts, and like you got to keep it manual. On the other hand, there are going to be a lot of things that you can automate, and then that's really what we specialize in, creating scalable automated systems, so you can just focus on what you're actually good at and what you should be doing as a salesperson, which is communicate people and help them solve their problems. So oftentimes the vast majority of signals can be automated. Most of the time, maybe I'm biased as a Clay partner. We use Clay for a lot of this. There are about 100 different types of signals that you can automate. And then you can keep it manual still. Like you can configure it daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever makes sense for your use case to monitor it. And then you get a notification on Slack, on email, whatever works for you. And then you can still review that signal as a human and act on that. And like on the other end of the spectrum, and this is what we do most of the time, when there is a signal, there's a bunch of qualification steps still that you got to do. But if the signal and the account and the contact, like we check all the boxes, why not reach out automatically? There's a very good use case for AI getting all the different data points and signals and crafting a unique, compelling, timely, relevant message. Today, it can be done. Like 1 to 2 years ago, it was not really possible. So my argument is you should automate like 90% of this. You can do this with profile views, website visitors, new connection requests, engagement on your profile, engagement on your competitors' profiles posts, fundraising, hiring, and so on and so forth, on the account level and on the contact level. And really, it's just your creativity that's going to be the barrier.
And I like that you called out there being a use case for an AI agent doing the research and then just also doing the personalization and reaching out automatically. That seems to be all the rage with the sales bros and a lot of agencies who are talking about outreach at scale. And it is possible, like you can have an AI agent take the context and just, one agent passing information to another who then reaches out. But that is something that I'm specifically against. But I did like how you said that, yes, there is a break between research and outreach, but that essentially is a human element, right? Or how are you thinking about this?
That's as much as I am pro automation. There are still in our outreach and our systems that we build for our customers, there is a human in the loop in a lot of the use cases. So, for example, when it comes to our outreach, we created a unique and like custom made system, a custom AI agent that we fed our business context, who we are, what we do, what's our models and pricing, and what are the services that we can help with. So we have that AI that understands the business context. And then when we receive an email from one of our campaigns that's running, then there's this AI who can write a response, and it writes a response. And then theoretically, when I'm like a very, very pro automation, I can just have that AI respond autonomously 24/7, 365. What I do have today is it does write the message, but it doesn't send it automatically. I am the human in the loop who reviews that. So then again, it's really about your preferred setup and your preferred flavor and how aggressive and how scalable you want things. There is still, room for humans in these systems.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And so you're primarily using Clay to monitor signals. I think we talked about this specifically, but one thing that we discussed does matter is who's targeting or who's actively hiring for personal specific persona. So let's say that's a business development rep, or I don't know, AI engineer. Who's hiring AI engineers right now versus outsourcing? LinkedIn Sales Navigator falls short here, and you're just able to see which accounts are hiring, and then you have to manually dig into say 200 accounts under your name. You might have mentioned this when we were preparing for this session, but is Clay able to monitor the signal where companies are hiring for a specific persona rather than, LinkedIn just giving you generic information on which companies are hiring?
I mean, what you can do is you have to define the job titles or the keywords in the job description, but you can define 100 different variations of that job title, essentially creating a persona. So when you say sales leader is your persona, then you can add the keywords for head of business
Hmm.
development, SDR team leads, VP of sales, head of sales, and so on and so forth.
And if you can do that, that's amazing. That's already a huge reason for using Clay, because again, if you don't want to go through manually 200 accounts who are hiring. Yes, you can set up on LinkedIn Sales Navigator department headcount growth in the percentage, but that means that that growth has already happened versus what initiatives are actually going on right now where you might be able to help. That's huge. Can you also get context, just like you would screen a 10K report with AI agents? Can you also screen the specific challenges or tech stack mentioned in these job descriptions to filter
Yeah,
which companies are
yeah,
fit?
you can when you scrape a job. There are several tools. Like you can just do this with Clay natively, but then you can use some other scrapers. For example, Epify is a pretty good one that I recommend very frequently. You can get not just the job title and location, but you can get the job description. If there is a visible person who posted the job listed as a hiring person, then you can have that person's contact details and the LinkedIn profile. And then you can either have a keyword search on the job description or have an AI read through that and summarize, okay, what this role is going to be about.
That's huge. Again, the least amount of time that you have to spend as an account executive or business development rep on research, which the only reason we're doing research is to know, hey, should I be reaching out? And then what message will likely get the attention of this account? That can be as little as seconds, or you already have that data fed into your CRM or your sales engagement platform. So that's huge. And then there are two other topics that you listed here. Can you talk more about how you're using an automated approach for inbound led outbound, and how you're tracking website visitor intent?
Yes, absolutely. So really the two kind of approaches or solutions available is contact level website visitor identification. You can think of them as like the RB2Bs of the world, where you see the actual person who was on your website, what pages they visited, how long they've spent on that site, and so on and so forth. So you can get a pretty good idea of what this person is after, what blog posts they've read, they see the pricing page, whatever. On the other hand, this is fairly straightforward of an automation. you capture the person, then you what you really want to do, and like I cannot recommend and emphasize this enough, just because of the fact that someone was on your website, even if they were on your pricing page or your demo request page, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have anything to do with what you're selling. You have to qualify that person. You will see that 70, 80, 90% of your website visitors are trash. You don't want to reach out. You don't want to have a conversation. You don't want to spend their time on them, your time on them. So you identify the person, then you qualify. Is this an account? Is this a contact that I want to talk to and want to spend my time on? Then you do an enrichment. You got to find their email address, their phone number, any other business context or data point that matters to you. And then you can either manually or automatically reach out when qualification is done. And then again, we also talked about this a couple of times already today. You shouldn't start your email with, "Hey, I saw you run our website. Do you wanna buy this? Do you need
Yes,
this?"
exactly. That
What you
has
gotta do
nothing to
more
do with
is
the
you.
job to be done. But Power, when you talk about qualification,
Yes,
are
exactly.
you talking about automated qualification? So again, the research part of doing background checks using AI agents, or is that something that
Correct.
okay, so you're not just saying, "Hey, this person visited our website. Now do your little research and qualify it yourself." You're championing setting up automated AI-based workflows to do that contextual qualification, and then based on that, pass it down to a business development rep or nurturing flow or just trash.
Yeah. When you have a larger team, you can route it to the
Mm.
appropriate rep based on this industry or the geo territories that you have, the geographical targeting. But then again, our take is there's an automation that qualifies it, and if we check all the boxes, there's an automation that sends the first
Hmm.
messages and connection requests.
Got it.
So you should really just gotta like think about all of this as modular systems. So you don't want one AI to like do all of the steps. The more granular and more specific you can be, the better job an AI agent will do.
That's a good takeaway for anyone still on the line. It's a multi-agent approach, and specifically everything that you mentioned essentially talks about getting the sales reps the insights they need to reach out essentially through research and automated qualification instead of taking that and then have an AI reach out automatically as well.
Yeah,
That's
and you can
great.
also think about more inbound-led use cases as well. So someone, books a demo with you, then you got to qualify them. You have to do a lot of research that can be automated and can be very specifically prompted. So then you can either say yes or no, qualify or disqualify them. You can route it to the appropriate team or the appropriate rep to take the first action, or just flat out automate even the final step of reaching out, scheduling the call, and so on and so forth.
Amazing. Thanks, Jenny. I think because uh, we're coming up on time. Two more questions for you. The first one is, what are the three main takeaways then that anyone still listening in should take away from today's session?
Your reps should spend their time with people, not building lists, not like writing copy, not researching, not updating CRM records. So I think the more automation, well designed automation you can use, the better. There is still room for people in the processes. Like it's not just going to be AI agents taking our jobs. There is a human element still. And the third one is really just like finding your flavor of go-to-market strategy, your automation, your willingness or aggressiveness to automation, because there are solutions and methods where you can just like get one massive AI SDR platform that can do it all for you, but it's going to be a black box. Where on the other hand, you can keep everything manual. I think on that kind of spectrum, you have to find a delicate balance and find what works for you. And that kind of testing and iteration and avoiding that trial and error, there's just no way around that.
Thanks, Jenny. I think those are good ways to wrap up today's session. Now, obviously, I'm still going to be pro manual and only focusing on the manual touch. But if someone is open to and actively looking to set up the automation so their reps can work more effectively, where can they reach out to you? Where can they find you and the team?
Yeah, just drop me a line on LinkedIn. Yanni Vronchik, or go on our website, growthtoday.co, and just drop us a line. You can directly book on our Calendly, and it's going to be me who will show up on the call. So you're not going to be passed down to an SDR. Actually, it's going to be me who you can talk to.
Straight to the point. Appreciate your time, Yanni. Thanks for sharing your experiences. And for anyone still on the line, thanks for being here. The recording will be available so you can rewatch this anytime. Thanks, Yanni, and talk to you soon. See you.
Thanks for having me. See you guys.